The hum of the dishwasher was my nightly lullaby. It was a sound of completion, of a day's work done, of order restored. I wiped down the already clean granite counters, my movements automatic, a well-rehearsed ballet in the theater of my own home. From the living room, the flickering blue light of the television painted abstract shapes on the wall. Mark was in there, probably scrolling on his phone, a nightly ritual that had long since replaced any form of conversation with me. This was our marriage. Not a battlefield, not a passionate romance, but a quiet, sterile museum of what once was. We were the curators of our own inertia. Mark went to work, provided a more than comfortable life. I managed the house, his schedule, his dry cleaning, the social calendar he barely participated in. We were efficient roommates, bound by a mortgage and a 10-year history. I poured myself a glass of water, my gaze drifting to our wedding photo on the fridge. My smile in that picture was so wide, so full of a hope that now felt like a foreign currency. Mark's arm was slung around me, his eyes crinkled at the corners. He used to look at me like I'd hung the moon. Now he looked through me as if I were part of the furniture. Reliable, functional, but utterly unremarkable. Going up, I called out, not expecting a response. A non-committal grunt was my reward. I climbed the stairs, the plush carpet swallowing the sound of my footsteps. In our bedroom, the king-sized bed felt vast and empty, even though he would eventually occupy his side of it. I changed into my pajamas and slid under the cool sheets, picking up my own tablet. This was my time. The house was quiet, the chores were done, and for a few precious minutes my mind was my own. I scrolled through mindless videos, recipes I'd never make, and inspirational quotes that felt like lies. Then a post from a men's lifestyle forum I followed for article research caught my eye. The title was, "Stuck in a Comfortable Marriage, Anyone Else?" It was a common enough topic. I clicked on it, my thumb idly scrolling through the comments. Men complaining about dead bedrooms, lack of excitement, the grind of domesticity. And then I saw it. A username I recognized instantly. Mark the Architect 87. His gamer tag, one he used for everything. My heart didn't sink, it simply stopped. The blood in my veins turned to ice. His comment was nestled among the others, a digital dagger to my heart. Yeah, I feel this. My wife is good, she takes care of our home, makes sure my life runs smoothly. But the spark is long gone. I don't love her anymore, not really. To be honest, I still think about my ex, Chloe, all the time. What we had was real fire. My current wife is just comfortable. And the thing is, I know she won't leave me. She's too dependent, too settled in this life. So I guess I'm just stuck. The words blurred. I don't love her anymore. I still think about his ex, Chloe. She won't leave me. The room tilted. The air grew thick, impossible to breathe. I read it again. And again. Each time, the letters etching themselves onto my soul with the precision of a laser. This wasn't a drunken confession to a friend. This wasn't a thought screamed in a moment of rage. This was a calm, calculated admission to a bunch of strangers on the internet. He had taken the deepest, most private vulnerabilities of our life together. My dedication, my care, the home I'd built with my own hands, and framed them as a prison he was stuck in. The pain was a physical thing, a white-hot brand searing my insides. It was immediately followed by a numbness so profound it was louder than any scream. I looked at the man in the wedding photo on my nightstand, and he was a stranger. A liar. A man who saw my love as dependency, my strength as weakness. He thought I was too settled to leave. He thought the life I'd curated was a cage for me, while for him it was just a gilded box. A sound escaped my lips, a choked, dry sob that held no tears. The shock was too absolute for crying. I felt the foundations of my entire world crack and crumble into dust. For 10 years I had built my identity around being Mark's wife. And with one anonymous comment he had revealed that the entire structure was a sham. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there, the blue light of the tablet reflecting in my wide, unblinking eyes. The hum of the dishwasher downstairs finished its cycle, and the house fell into a true, deep silence. And in that silence, something new was born. It wasn't grief. It wasn't despair. It was a cold, clear, and utterly focused rage. He thought I wouldn't leave. He thought I was just good. A caretaker for his home and his ego. A plan, stark and simple, began to form in the ruins of my heart. It wasn't a plan of screaming matches or tearful accusations. That was the drama of a woman who still cared. I was past that. This would be quieter. Cleaner. More final. I took a screenshot of his comment. I saved it to a secure folder he knew nothing about. I then emailed it to myself from an account I never used. Then I got out of bed. I walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back had hollow eyes, but there was a new steel in her spine. The wife was gone. In her place was something else. When I heard his heavy tread on the stairs, I was already back in bed, my breathing even, my face turned away from his side. He slipped in beside me, the mattress dipping with his familiar weight. He smelled of his aftershave and the faint metallic scent of his phone. He had no idea. No idea that the world had just ended and begun again in the space of 20 minutes. No idea that the woman lying next to him, the one he was so sure was trapped, was already plotting her escape. And her revenge. He fell asleep almost instantly, his breathing deepening into a soft snore. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the ghostly blue light of my resolve painting the darkness. The game was on. And he didn't even know we were playing. The morning sun streamed through the blinds, painting stripes of gold across the duvet. It was a cruel kind of beauty, the world continuing on as if it hadn't fundamentally shifted on its axis just hours before. I moved through my morning routine with robotic precision. Shower, dress, makeup. My hands didn't shake. My face in the mirror was a placid lake, showing no sign of the tectonic plates grinding beneath the surface. Mark was already at the kitchen island, shoveling down the scrambled eggs and toast I'd made. He had his tablet open next to his plate, scanning the news. The same tablet he'd used to dismantle our marriage. "Morning," he mumbled around a mouthful of food, not looking up. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady, pleasant even. It was the same tone I used every day. The tone of a good wife. The performance had begun. I poured him a fresh cup of coffee, black, just how he liked it. I placed it beside him, my hand not trembling as I set the mug down. I watched him take a sip, completely oblivious. He was living in the world he'd constructed in his head, a world where I was a permanent, uncomplaining fixture. He had no clue he was sitting across from a ghost, a woman whose soul had already vacated the premises. "Big presentation today," he said, finally glancing up. His eyes were the same hazel eyes I'd fallen in love with a decade ago. Now they just looked like glass. "I'm sure you'll crush it," I said, the words ash in my mouth. I turned away to load the dishwasher, hiding the cold smile that threatened to twist my lips. Crush it. Oh, I would crush something all right. But it wouldn't be his presentation. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, the house exhaled. The facade I'd been holding up collapsed, and for a moment, I leaned against the kitchen counter, the weight of it all pressing down on me. But the self-pity was a luxury I couldn't afford. The numbness of the night had solidified into a diamond-hard resolve. I went upstairs to his office. It was a space I rarely entered, his sanctuary of blueprints and man-cave decor. My heart hammered against my ribs, a traitorous rhythm of fear and excitement. This was a violation, I knew. But he had violated the sanctity of our union first. All bets were off. I started with his filing cabinet. I wasn't even entirely sure what I was looking for. Financial records, anything that would give me a clearer picture of what was mine. I was operating on instinct, on the primal need to secure my own future. I found folders for taxes, mortgage statements, investment portfolios. I took pictures of everything with my phone. Then I turned to his desktop computer. He was lazy with passwords. They were all saved in his browser. A few clicks and I was in. His email was a mess of work correspondence and spam. I did a search for Chloe. My stomach clenched. There were emails, not recent but from a year or two ago. Friendly mostly. Him liking a post she'd made, her responding. But then I found one from him sent late one night after he'd had a few too many whiskeys. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd tried harder. This life is fine. But it's not you." She'd never responded. The coward hadn't even had the guts to send it to the right address. It was sitting in his drafts folder. A digital monument to his pathetic longing. I took a screenshot. Another piece of evidence for the case I was building, not in a court of law but in the court of my own conscience. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that this wasn't a one-off comment. Next I called a lawyer. My hands were slick with sweat as I dialed the number of the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. A woman named Eleanor Vance, whose name was synonymous with eviscerating wealthy, unfaithful husbands. I made an appointment for the following week under a false name at a neutral location. I couldn't risk Mark finding out. The next few days were a masterclass in duplicity. I made his favorite meals. I asked about his day and pretended to listen to the answers. I wore the clothes he liked. I was the perfect, attentive wife, all while my mind was a war room, strategizing, planning, calculating. I opened a new bank account in my name only, transferring small, untraceable amounts of money from our joint account. I started discreetly moving my most precious belongings. My grandmother's jewelry, my photo albums, the first edition books I'd collected, to a storage unit I rented under my maiden name. The hardest part was the loneliness. I had friends, of course. Sarah, my best friend since college. But I couldn't tell her. Not yet. The slightest crack in my armor, the smallest hint of what was coming, and it could all unravel. I had to be a fortress. One afternoon I was in the garden pulling weeds with a ferocity that was about more than just horticulture when my phone rang. It was my younger brother, Liam. "Hey Els. Just checking in. You've been a bit quiet lately." Tears pricked at the back of my eyes instantly. Liam was my person. We'd weathered our parents' messy divorce together. He would understand. The urge to confess, to sob it all out, was a physical ache in my throat. "I'm okay," I said, my voice tight. "Just busy. You know how it is." There was a pause on the other end. "No, I don't. What's going on? Is it Mark?" The directness of his question undid me. A single hot tear escaped and traced a path through the garden dirt on my cheek. I took a shaky breath. "Liam, I can't talk about it. Not yet. But I need you to know something. Whatever happens in the next few months, I need you to be on my side. No questions asked." His tone changed instantly from concerned brother to protective ally. "Always. You know that. What do you need? Just be ready. I might need a place to stay. Soon. You've got it. Mom's old cottage is empty. It's yours if you need it." The relief was so profound my knees felt weak. I had an escape route. I had an ally. I wasn't completely alone. That night Mark and I were supposed to go to a dinner party at his boss's house. I put on a little black dress, did my hair and makeup, and smiled as we drove through the city lights. At the party I was charming. I laughed at his boss's jokes, I complimented the hostess on her home, I made small talk with the other architects' wives. I watched Mark across the room holding a glass of wine, looking smug and comfortable. He saw me playing my part perfectly and he was pleased. The good wife making him look good. He came up beside me, sliding a proprietary arm around my waist. "You're in a good mood tonight," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. I looked up at him, a perfect, glittering smile on my face. "It's a lovely party," I said sweetly. "And you're looking very handsome tonight." He preened, completely buying it. He saw what he wanted to see, a contented woman secure in her role. What he didn't see was the scheming, furious, liberated woman hiding behind the smile. He didn't see the bank statements, the lawyer's appointment circled in invisible ink on my calendar, the storage unit key burning a hole in my purse. He didn't see the pieces of my new life, slowly, carefully being assembled while I played my part in his. The unraveling of our life together was happening stitch by invisible stitch, and he was too blind, too arrogant, to see the whole tapestry was coming apart in his hands. The meeting with Eleanor Vance was held in a quiet, book-lined conference room in a law firm that smelled of old money and sharp ambition. Eleanor herself was a woman in her 50s with a severe silver bob and eyes that missed nothing. I'd brought my folder of evidence, the screenshot, the financial records, the draft email to Chloe. I laid it all out, my voice calm and detached as if I were presenting a business case. Which in a way I was. The case for my freedom. Eleanor listened without interruption, her fingers steepled. When I finished, she gave a slow, approving nod. "You've been very thorough, my dear. Emotionally detaching while gathering evidence is the hardest part. Most clients come to me a hysterical mess. You are a breath of fresh, cold air." She picked up the printout of Mark's forum comment. "This is gold. It's a clear admission of emotional abandonment and a lack of commitment to the marriage. Combined with the financial records, we can build a very strong case for a favorable settlement. The marital home, significant spousal support, a division of assets that reflects your contribution as a homemaker." She looked at me. "What is it you want exactly?" I hadn't allowed myself to articulate it until that moment. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted to shatter his complacent world into a million pieces. But more than that, I wanted to be free. I want out, I said, my voice firm. Cleanly and completely. I want what I'm entitled to. And I want him to understand in no uncertain terms that I was never stuck with him. I was choosing him. And now I'm choosing myself. Eleanor's lips curved into a thin, predatory smile. Excellent. Then here is what we do. She outlined her strategy. We would wait until a key project at his firm was completed, a time when he would be feeling secure, successful. We would have all the paperwork ready, a process server on standby. The goal was maximum impact, minimum time for him to mount a defense. The shock factor is your friend, Eleanor said. A shocked opponent is a weak opponent. As I left the firm, the September air feeling crisper, cleaner than it had in years, a new nagging thought began to worm its way into my mind. Chloe. 4 years she had been the ghost at our feast, the one I could never quite measure up to. Mark had never spoken of her in great detail, but the fragments I'd gathered painted a picture of a vibrant, impulsive, artistic woman. The anti-me. Where I was calm, she was stormy. Where I built a home, she probably built bonfires on the beach. My curiosity became a compulsion. I needed to see her. I needed to look at the woman who held such a powerful sway over my husband's imagination even now. It didn't take much internet sleuthing to find her. Chloe Miller. She was a freelance graphic designer with a strong online presence. Her Instagram was a riot of color and life. Pictures of her travels, her artwork, her laughing with friends in sun-drenched cafes. She was beautiful in a wild, untamed way, with a cascade of curly dark hair and eyes that sparkled with mischief. Looking at her photos was like pressing on a bruise. This was the real fire he pined for. This vibrant, exciting woman, while I was the one who made sure his socks were matched. The old insecurities rose up, threatening to choke me. Was I boring? Was I just good? But then I looked closer. Beyond the curated highlights, I saw something else. In the comments of her posts, there were often snide remarks from what looked like an ex-boyfriend. Her captions, while mostly upbeat, sometimes hinted at a loneliness, a feeling of being misunderstood. He was human. Flawed. And then I saw a photo from 6 months ago. She was at an art gallery opening, and standing next to her with his arm draped casually over the shoulder of another woman was Mark. My Mark. He was looking at the camera, but Chloe was looking just past it, a faint, sad smile on her face. They were in the same room and he hadn't even mentioned it to me. He'd probably come home that night and eaten the dinner I'd kept warm for him. The discovery should have enraged me. Instead, it filled me with a strange, clarifying pity. For both of them. He was pining for a ghost, a fantasy, while she had clearly moved on, living her life. He was the one who was stuck. Not me. Not her. Armed with this new perspective, my resolve hardened. This wasn't just about me and Mark anymore. It was about shattering the fantasy he'd built. He didn't deserve the comfort of my home or the dream of Chloe. A few days later, fueled by a courage I didn't know I possessed, I did something reckless. I created a fake Instagram account and sent Chloe a direct message. It was brief and to the point. Hi Chloe. You don't know me, but I believe you know my husband, Mark Evans. I recently discovered he's been holding a torch for you for years, including writing an unsent email about how his life with me is fine, but it's not you. I thought you should know the narrative he's constructing. I'm dealing with my side of things. I hope you're well. I included a screenshot of the draft email. It was a risk. He could ignore it. She could tell him. But something in my gut told me she wouldn't. The look in her eyes in that gallery photo. She knew what it was like to be on the receiving end of Mark's particular brand of emotional negligence. Her reply came an hour later. My heart hammered as I opened it. Whoa. I don't even know what to say. I'm so sorry. Mark and I dated a lifetime ago. It was intense, but it ended for a reason. He's emotionally unavailable and lives in a fantasy world. I've run into him a few times over the years and he's always been weirdly nostalgic for a past that never really existed like he remembers it. What he wrote is cruel and unfair to you. Please know that his fire was mostly drama. You're building a real life. It seems he can't tell the difference. Again, I'm truly sorry you're going through this. I read her message 3 times. The ghost had spoken. And she had handed me a weapon I hadn't even known I needed. Validation. He wasn't pining for a real person. He was pining for a story he'd told himself, A story where he was the tragic hero trapped in a mundane life. My reality, our home, our marriage. It was all just a boring backdrop for his personal drama. The last vestiges of doubt and insecurity melted away. I wasn't competing with a perfect ex. I was extricating myself from a man who was in love with his own sadness. I didn't reply to Chloe. There was nothing more to say. But I saved her message. It was another piece of my armor. That night as I set the table for dinner, I felt lighter than I had in years. Mark came home looking tired but satisfied. His big project was wrapping up. "Smells good in here," he said, dropping his briefcase by the door. "It's your favorite," I said. "Beef bourguignon." He smiled, a genuine relaxed smile. "See? This is what I mean. You're so good to me." The words that had once filled me with a sense of purpose now sounded like an epitaph. "You're so good to me." Not, "I love you." Not, "You're amazing." It's good. A service provider. I smiled back, a genuine smile this time. Because I knew. His comfort, his security, his good wife. It was all about to vanish in a puff of smoke. And the ghost he'd been chasing had already given me her blessing to burn it all down. The following weeks were a study in surreal normalcy. It was as if I were an actor in a play, performing the role of Elara, the devoted wife, with an Oscar-worthy dedication, all while the director in my head was shouting cues for an entirely different, much more explosive production. Mark's big project, the Zenith Tower, was in its final stages. He was preoccupied, spending long hours at the office or on-site, which suited my purposes perfectly. His distraction was my camouflage. The busier he was, the more invisible my own activities became. I met with Eleanor Vance twice more, the paperwork for the divorce petition taking shape. We decided on a date for the serving of the papers, the Friday after the Zenith Tower's official launch party. The party was a black tie event, the pinnacle of Mark's professional year. He would be riding a high of success and validation. The perfect moment to pull the rug out from under him. "Let him have his moment in the sun," Eleanor had said, her voice like chipped ice. "The fall will be that much harder." I'd also taken Liam up on his offer. I'd secretly moved a few suitcases of essential clothing and personal items to my mother's old cottage, a cozy, slightly ramshackle place by the sea, a 2-hour drive from the city. It smelled of salt air and old wood, and the first time I walked in, a peace I hadn't felt in years settled over me. This was my lifeboat. The only thorn in my side was the upcoming Zenith Tower Gala itself. I was expected to attend, to play the part of the proud, supportive architect's wife. The thought of putting on a floor-length gown and smiling for cameras while my heart was a block of ice was nauseating. But I saw it as the final test, the last performance of my old life. I would give him a night he would remember all right. It would be the beautiful, shimmering prelude to his ruin. The day of the gala, I spent the afternoon at a high-end salon, getting my hair styled into an elegant chignon and my makeup professionally done. I looked polished, sophisticated, a perfect accessory for a successful man. When I slipped into the emerald green silk gown I'd bought for the occasion, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Looked powerful. Mark's eyes widened when he saw me. "Elara, you look incredible." There was a flicker of something in his gaze I hadn't seen in years. Genuine desire mixed with a hint of surprise. He was seeing me, truly seeing me for the first time in a long time. And of course it was when I was dressed up as someone else. "Thank you, Mark," I said demurely, turning so he could zip me up. His fingers fumbled slightly on the clasp. The gala was a whirl of crystal, champagne, and self-congratulation. I held his arm, my smile never wavering. I laughed at the right moments, nodded sympathetically at stories of construction woes, and complimented other wives on their jewels. I was the perfect plus one. At one point, Mark was surrounded by a group of colleagues, holding forth on the building's innovative design. He was in his element, charismatic and confident. He caught my eye across the room and gave me a small, proud smile. A year ago that smile would have made my whole week. Now it just looked like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence I'd already finished reading. I circulated, making small talk, but my mind was elsewhere. I was mentally rehearsing the following day. The process server was scheduled for 10 a.m. Mark, hungover from success and champagne, would be sleeping in. I would be gone already at the cottage. I'd left a letter, short and devoid of emotion, explaining nothing. The papers would explain everything. Your husband is a very lucky man, an older colleague of his said to me, his gaze appreciative. A stunning wife and a career-defining project. He has it all. I took a sip of my champagne, the bubbles sharp and cold on my tongue. Doesn't he just? I replied, my smile serene. But you know what they say. All that glitters. He chuckled, not understanding the darkness behind my words. The ride home was quiet. Mark was blissfully exhausted, leaning his head back against the seat, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. That was a perfect night, he murmured, reaching over and squeezing my knee. You were perfect. I didn't flinch. I just looked out the window at the passing city lights, a kaleidoscope of a life I was about to leave behind. Perfect. He had no idea. At home he fell into bed, asleep almost before his head hit the pillow. I, however, was wide awake. I changed out of the beautiful gown and into a simple pair of jeans and a sweater. I did one last silent walkthrough of the house. The living room where he'd typed that fateful comment. The kitchen where I'd poured 1,000 cups of coffee. Our bedroom with its vast, empty bed. I felt no nostalgia, only a profound sense of closure. This was a set I was leaving. The play was over. I picked up my go bag, which I'd hidden in the back of my closet. It held my passport, my new bank documents, my laptop, and the few sentimental items I couldn't bear to leave. I didn't look back as I walked down the stairs and out the front door. The night air was cool and bracing. I slid into my car, the engine purring to life. As I pulled away from the curb, from the house that had been my gilded cage, I didn't feel a single tremor of regret. I felt only a soaring, terrifying, exhilarating sense of freedom. I drove through the sleeping city and onto the highway that led to the coast, to the cottage, to my new life. The storm was coming, and I was no longer in its path. I was the one who had summoned it. The first rays of dawn were painting the sea in shades of rose and gold when I finally pulled up to the cottage. I was exhausted, the adrenaline that had fueled my escape having long since dissipated, leaving behind a hollow, shaky feeling. But it was a good kind of hollow, like a room that had been cleared of old, dusty furniture, ready for something new. I let myself in, the familiar, slightly damp smell a comfort. I didn't unpack. I just collapsed onto the old floral print sofa in the living room and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I was woken hours later by the insistent buzzing of my phone. I'd set it to Do Not Disturb, but it was vibrating with the force of a trapped hornet. I picked it up. The screen was a waterfall of notifications. Missed calls. Text messages. From Mark. From his mother. From his sister. From numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't read them. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I simply turned the phone off. The silence that followed was blissful. I made myself a cup of tea and took it out to the small weather-beaten deck that overlooked the churning gray ocean. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and breathed in the salt air. This was my life now. This quiet. This peace. Meanwhile, 60 miles away, my old life was exploding. Mark groaned, his head throbbing in time with his heartbeat. The champagne. The victory. The perfect night. He reached across the bed, expecting to find the warm curve of Alara's body. The sheets were cold and empty. He squinted at the clock. 10:15 a.m. She was probably already downstairs making coffee, maybe whipping up one of her hangover cure smoothies. The thought comforted him. Everything was as it should be. He stumbled into the shower, letting the hot water pound some life back into him. He felt like a king. The Zenith Tower was a triumph. His career was set. He had a beautiful, capable wife who managed his life with effortless grace. He had it all. Wrapped in a towel, he padded downstairs, expecting the smell of coffee and bacon. The house was silent. Oddly silent. "Alara," he called out. No answer. He walked into the kitchen. It was spotless as always. But no coffee pot was gurgling. No plate was set out for him. On the island, propped against the fruit bowl, was a single white envelope with his name on it in Alara's precise handwriting. A prickle of unease ran down his spine. He tore it open. "Mark, I've left. By the time you read this, you will have been served with divorce papers. Do not contact me. Any communication should go through my lawyer, Eleanor Vance. Her details are enclosed. This is not a negotiation." Alara. The words didn't make sense. They swam in front of his eyes. Left? Divorce papers? Eleanor Vance? The name was a legend in certain circles, a harbinger of financial destruction for men like him. This had to be a joke. A bad dream. He read the note again. The cold, final tone was like a slap. This is not a negotiation. The doorbell rang. His heart leaped. Lara. She'd come back. It was a joke, a stupid, terrible joke, and she was here to laugh it off. He rushed to the door, yanking it open, a relieved smile already forming on his face. It wasn't Lara. A stern-faced man in a cheap suit stood on the doorstep. Mark Evans. Yes. You've been served. The man thrust a thick legal envelope into Mark's hands, turned on his heel and walked away. Mark stood there, frozen, the heavy packet in his hands. He looked down at it. In the matter of the marriage of Lara Evans and Mark Evans. He stumbled back into the house, collapsing onto the bottom step of the staircase. With trembling fingers he tore open the envelope. The words were a blur of legalese, but he grasped the essentials. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Grounds. Irreconcilable differences. And then the exhibits. Exhibit A. A printed screenshot of his comment on the forum. I don't love her anymore. I still think about his ex, Chloe. My wife won't leave me. The blood drained from his face. He knew. She'd known for weeks. Months. The eggs she'd made, the parties she'd attended, the smiles, the quiet companionship. It had all been a lie. A performance. While he was basking in his own success, she had been meticulously planning his annihilation. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely dial. He called her. It went straight to voicemail. He called again. And again. He texted. Lara, what is this? This is crazy. Call me. We can talk about this. Where are you? You can't be serious. Because of a stupid comment. No response. The silence from her end was more terrifying than any scream. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. He called his mother. Mom, something's happened. Alara's left me. She's filed for divorce. What? What did you do, Mark? His mother's voice was sharp, accusatory. He'd always been her golden boy, but she had a soft spot for Alara, the daughter-in-law who never caused trouble. I didn't do anything, he yelled, then lowered his voice, trying to sound rational. She's overreacting. He found a comment I made online. It was nothing. He scrolled through the divorce papers again. His eyes landed on the section about spousal support. The number Eleanor Vance was proposing was astronomical. It would cripple him. Then he saw the part about the house. He wanted it. He wanted everything. She won't leave me, he whispered to the empty, silent house, the echo of his own arrogant words now a taunting phantom. The reality of his situation crashed down on him. The comfortable life, the good wife who took care of everything. It was gone. Vanished. And in its place was a legal battle that promised to be brutal, humiliating, and devastatingly expensive. He was no longer the successful architect, the man who had it all. He was a fool, sitting alone on his staircase, holding the shattered pieces of the life he'd been too blind to appreciate. The shock was absolute, a physical pain in his chest. He dropped his head into his hands, the first true tremor of fear coursing through him. He had been so sure she would never leave. And she was gone. The silence in the house was no longer peaceful. It was accusatory. Every clean surface, every neatly folded towel, every meal that wasn't magically appearing on the table was a reminder of what he had lost, of what he had so carelessly taken for granted. The first week was a blur of rage, panic, and desperate attempts to regain control. Mark's initial shock had curdled into a boiling anger. How dare she? How dare she do this to him? To them? He hired the most aggressive lawyer he could find, a pit bull named Robert Gage, who promised to fight fire with fire. But fighting fire with fire is a dangerous game when your opponent is Eleanor Vance, and she has a bottomless well of icy cold water. Mark's first move was to try and freeze their joint accounts. He logged into their online banking, only to find that a significant portion of their liquid savings, his savings as he thought of them, had already been moved to a new account in only Alara's name. The transfers were small, dated over the last 2 months, perfectly legal and utterly devastating. She had been funding her war chest with his own money. He roared in frustration, slamming his laptop shut. The clever, quiet woman he'd married had outmaneuvered him financially. Next, he decided to play the sympathy card. He started calling mutual friends, his voice heavy with a performative confusion. Dave, hey, look, I don't know if you've heard, but Alara has left. Filed for divorce. I'm blindsided, man. Completely blindsided. I have no idea what happened. The responses were not what he expected. Oh, Mark. I'm sorry to hear that, Dave said, his tone oddly flat. Listen, man, I've got to go. He called Sarah, Alara's best friend. Sarah, please, you have to talk to her. This is insane. She's not answering my calls. Is she with you? There was a long pause on the other end. Mark, Sarah said, her voice cold and clear. She told me everything. Told you what? About some stupid comment? She's throwing away 10 years over a comment. She showed me the comment, Mark, Sarah said, her words like little daggers. She showed me the draft email to Chloe too. You didn't just make a comment. You built a shrine to another woman in our marriage and then invited the whole internet to see it. You humiliated her. You don't get to play the victim here. The line went dead. He stared at his phone, a cold dread seeping into his bones. He had told people. She had evidence. He was the villain in this story and everyone knew it. His arrogance began to crack, revealing the petulant child beneath. He started drinking more, the empty whiskey bottles piling up in the recycling bin. A bin he now had to take out himself. He ordered takeout every night, the containers littering the once impeccable kitchen. The house began to smell of stale food and despair. His work suffered. He was distracted, short-tempered. The glow from the Zenith Tower success faded quickly as he missed deadlines and snapped at junior architects. His boss called him in for a quiet, concerned conversation. Mark, the work on the Pendleton project is not up to your usual standard. Is everything okay at home? We heard about you and Alara. We're all very sorry. He wanted to scream. He was tired of people being sorry for him. They didn't understand. This wasn't a tragedy, it was an ambush. In a moment of drunken desperation, he did the unthinkable. He called Chloe. Maybe she would understand. Maybe she, of all people, could see how unhinged Alara was being. Her phone rang twice before she picked up. Mark, she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. It was flat. Final. Chloe, hi. God, it's good to hear your voice. You won't believe what's happening. Alara's left me. She's filed for divorce because of some stupid thing I wrote online. She's lost her mind. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. She contacted me, Mark. The bottom dropped out of his stomach. What? She sent me a message. She showed me the email you never sent. The one about how your life is fine, but it's not me. Chloe's voice was laced with a disgust he'd never heard from her before. I felt sick for her, Mark. I felt sick for myself that you've been carrying around this fantasy about us for years. We were kids. It was a mess. I have a life now. A life you are not a part of. What you did to Alara is cruel and cowardly. Don't call me again. The click in his ear was the sound of the last door slamming shut. The ghost he'd been pining for had exorcised him. He was completely and utterly alone. The reality of his situation settled upon him with the weight of a tombstone. Alara wasn't coming back. His friends saw him for what he was. His ex wanted nothing to do with him. His career was faltering. The beautiful, comfortable life he'd been so sure of was a pile of ashes. He walked through the silent, dirty house, a stranger in his own life. He ended up in her walk-in closet. It was half empty, the gaps where her clothes had been like missing teeth. He caught the faint, lingering scent of her perfume on a stray sweater. He sank to the floor, surrounded by the ghosts of her presence, and finally, for the first time, he wept. Not tears of anger, but of a shocking, profound, and utterly deserved grief. He had thought he was stuck. Now he truly was. Stuck in a big empty house with the crushing knowledge that he had thrown away something precious, something real for a fantasy. And the woman he'd thought would never leave was gone, living a life he knew nothing about, a life she had chosen for herself without him. The unraveling was complete. Mark Evans was now just a man alone in the dark, with no one to blame but himself. The first month at the cottage was a lesson in rediscovering silence. Not the oppressive silence of my marriage, but a fertile, peaceful quiet where I could hear my own thoughts for the first time in a decade. I didn't turn my phone back on for a week. When I finally did, I waded through the deluge of messages from Mark. The anger, the pleading, the desperation, with a detached curiosity. They were like weather reports from a hurricane I had safely evacuated. I replied to none of them. Instead, I called Eleanor. He's retained Robert Gage, she told me, sounding pleased. A predictable choice. All bluster. We'll eat him for lunch. Good, I said, my voice calm. Proceed. I spent my days walking the windswept beach, the cold sea spray a baptism. I started reading again, devouring books I'd meant to read for years. I cooked simple meals for one and didn't set a table. The freedom was intoxicating. Liam visited on weekends, bringing groceries and a fierce, protective energy. He never pushed for details, just was there, a solid presence reminding me I was loved. You look different, Els, he said one evening as we shared a bottle of wine by the fire. Lighter. I feel like I've put down a weight I didn't even know I was carrying, I admitted. It was during one of my long walks that I met Arthur. He was an older man, probably in his late 60s, with a weathered, kind face and a Labrador retriever who bounded joyfully through the surf. The dog, named Bear, came barreling up to me, dropping a slobber-covered stick at my feet. I'm so sorry, the man said, hurrying up. He has no manners. It's quite all right, I said, laughing and throwing the stick for the ecstatic dog. I could use the company. His name was Arthur Pender. He was a retired history professor who lived in the cottage 2 down from mine. He was a widower, he told me simply, and had lived here for 5 years, finding solace in the sea. There was no pity in his eyes when I told him I was going through a divorce, just a quiet understanding. We fell into an easy routine. Most mornings we'd meet on the beach, our walks syncing up. We didn't talk much at first, just walked in a comfortable silence, accompanied by the crash of the waves and Bear's happy panting. But slowly I started to talk. I told him about my love for art history, a subject I'd abandoned after college. I told him about the crushing loneliness of my marriage. I didn't tell him about the comment or the revenge. I told him about the quiet erosion of my spirit. He listened, truly listened, in a way no one ever had. He didn't offer advice or platitudes. He just offered presence. One afternoon he invited me over for tea. His cottage was a delightful chaos of books, maps and half-finished watercolor paintings. It was the home of a man fully engaged with life. You know, he said, handing me a chipped mug of strong hot tea, forgiveness is often misunderstood. It's not about absolving the other person. It's about setting down the burden of your own anger so you can walk freely again. I looked at him, the truth of his words settling deep inside me. I wasn't ready to forgive Mark, not by a long shot. But I understood that the cold rage that had fueled my escape was a fuel that would eventually burn out, and if I wasn't careful it would burn me out with it. My time with Arthur was a bomb. It was a glimpse of a different kind of relationship. One based on mutual respect, quiet companionship, and the freedom to be utterly oneself. Meanwhile, the legal machinery ground on. Eleanor was a force of nature. Mark's lawyer, Gage, tried every trick in the book, accusing me of alienation of affection, of being a gold digger, of abandoning the marital home. But against Eleanor's cold, factual arsenal, the comment, the financial records, the testimony of my contributions, his bluster was useless. We had a preliminary hearing via video conference. I logged on from the quiet of the cottage's spare bedroom. Mark logged on from his office. When his face appeared on the screen I was taken aback. His eyes were shadowed, his jawline softer. The confident architect was gone, replaced by a haggard, defeated man. He looked at me and for a fleeting second I saw not anger but a profound, bewildered loss. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but the judge entered the virtual room and the moment was gone. The hearing was a rout. Eleanor was impeccable. The judge, a no-nonsense woman, had clearly read the file. She approved temporary spousal support at the rate we'd requested and made it clear that my claim to the marital home was strong. Mark's lawyer spluttered and objected, but it was like trying to hold back the tide with a spoon. As the judge signed the orders, I looked at Mark's face on the screen. The shock from the day he was served was gone, replaced by a dawning, horrifying comprehension. He was losing. He was going to lose the house, a significant portion of his income, and any last shred of dignity. He was realizing that the good wife was, in fact, a formidable opponent. When the hearing ended, his screen went black immediately. I sat for a long time in the quiet room. There was no thrill of victory. No surge of vengeful joy. There was only a deep, resonant sense of justice. The scales, so long unbalanced, were finally being set right. I walked outside where Arthur was waiting on the deck, a cup of tea steaming beside the one he'd made for me. "How did it go?" he asked gently. "It went," I said, sitting down beside him. I looked out at the endless gray ocean. "I think it's finally over." And I meant it. The battle was won. The war for my soul was over. I had faced the storm I'd summoned, and I had emerged on the other side, standing on the shore of a new world, ready to begin again. The final divorce decree arrived on a crisp, bright morning in early spring. The cherry trees near the cottage were just beginning to bud, a faint pink haze against the clear blue sky. The envelope was thick, final. I took it from the postman's hands, its weight feeling insignificant. I didn't open it immediately. I made a pot of coffee, took it out to the deck, and watched a fishing boat chug its way across the horizon. The sea was calm today, a sheet of shimmering glass. I felt the same calm inside me. The frantic energy of escape and revenge had settled into a steady, quiet pulse of life. Finally, I slid my thumb under the flap and pulled out the sheaf of papers. The legal language was dense, but the summary was clear. It was over. The marriage of Alara and Mark Evans was dissolved. I was awarded the house, my house, which was already on the market, the proceeds to be split after the mortgage was paid. Spousal support was granted for 5 years, a sum that would allow me to breathe, to find my footing without panic. It was a clean, decisive, and very favorable break. There was no letter from Mark enclosed. No last-ditch attempt at contact. The silence from his end had been absolute since the final settlement was negotiated. I supposed his pride, what was left of it, couldn't bear it. I felt a flicker of something, not sadness for him but for the people we used to be. The 2 young kids in that wedding photo who had no idea the paths they would walk. I hoped for his sake that he learned something from the wreckage. But that was no longer my concern. His happiness was his own project now. My project was my own life. Later that week I met Arthur for our walk. Bear, as always, raced ahead, a black streak of joy against the sand. "The papers came," I told him. He stopped walking and looked at me, his wise eyes searching my face. "And how do you feel?" I considered the question. I looked out at the vastness of the ocean, at the gulls wheeling overhead, at the solid, kind man beside me. I thought of the small art gallery in the nearby town where I'd started volunteering, rediscovering my love for painting. I thought of the novel I'd started reading just for me. I thought of the quiet pleasure of a meal I cooked simply because I wanted to eat it. "I felt free," I said. And it was the truest thing I'd felt in years. Arthur smiled, a warm, crinkling smile that reached his eyes. "Good," he said simply. "That's very good." We started walking again, our shoulders not quite touching, but a new, unspoken understanding humming in the space between us. This wasn't a whirlwind. It wasn't a fire like Mark had pined for. It was something slower, deeper, more real. It was a companionship built on the solid ground of mutual respect and hard-won peace. A few days later I drove into the city for the last time. The sold sign was already staked in the front lawn of the house I'd shared with Mark. I used my key for the final time. The locks would be changed for the new owners tomorrow. The house was empty, echoing with the ghosts of a life that no longer existed. Sunlight streamed through the bare windows, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air. It didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a museum exhibit I was finally leaving. I did one last walkthrough, not out of nostalgia, but out of respect for the woman who had lived here. I stood in the kitchen where I'd received the digital death blow. I stood in the living room where I'd performed the role of the happy wife. I stood in the bedroom where I'd plotted my escape. There were no tears. Only a quiet, profound gratitude for that woman's strength. She had been good. She had been kind. And when she was pushed too far, she had discovered a core of steel she never knew she possessed. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Arthur. "Bear and I are concocting a stew for dinner. Far too much for one. Your company would be appreciated." A genuine smile spread across my face, the kind that started deep inside and worked its way out. "I'll be there," I typed back. "I'm just closing a door." I walked out of the house for the last time, pulling the heavy door shut behind me. The click of the lock was not an ending, but a period at the end of a long, difficult sentence. I didn't look back. I got into my car and pointed it towards the coast, towards the cottage, towards the unpredictable, open-ended story that was now entirely my own. The revenge had been sweet, yes. But the second chance was everything. I had served him divorce papers and he had been shocked. But the greatest shock of all was the one I'd given myself. The glorious, terrifying and beautiful discovery that I was and had always been enough. The end.